Hello and welcome back to Division I Rejects. This is episode 7. Today we've got a pretty packed episode, a lot of great conversation. First we'll be joined by a buddy of mine from Findlay University down in Ohio. They're part of the Division II conference of the GMAC, the Great Midwest Athletic Conference. And then we will get into talking about how the Paul Bunyan Trophy is back in East Lansing. Michigan State pulls off the unreal upset against Michigan. I can't wait to talk about that. I know Zach can't either. And then we'll go into a little bit of NFL talk at the end, so stick around. The Detroit Lions go back to what they do best, and that is being the Detroit Lions, unfortunately, as that is. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are number 1 in the Week 9 power rankings for the NFL, and I think that's totally deserved. They totally deserve that because of the way they played this past weekend. And that team is looking unreal right now. But otherwise, this podcast is recorded on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, hello. But if not, tell friends to find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or I think like 10 other platforms. So if they listen to a podcast, our podcast is going to be on it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Let's get to that interview with Isaac Kinney from Findlay University. Joining us on this episode of Division I Rejects, we have freshman middle linebacker from Findlay University in Ohio, one of the best teams in the Great Midwest Conference. He was an all-state player at the high school level and a former teammate of mine at Lake Orion High School. Isaac Kinney, what's going on, Isaac?
Hey, how's it going, Kobe? I'm doing pretty good.
Doing pretty good, man. I know you're beefing up down there in Ohio. What are they feeding you boys?
We got like a pretty sweet meal plan that you get a pick that you want, and they come in, they weigh you. If they don't like what you weigh, they'll give you like a meal plan of what you should be eating and stuff like that. So I came in a little light, but they beefed me up pretty fast with.
You're always talking about your brother Sam and how he went up to Michigan Tech and put on like 40 pounds. You trying to catch up to him or what?
No, not too much. I got to make sure I'm faster than him still. So
hell yeah, I love that. Now he's not to get off track here, but he's at more of a defensive end spot than you are, right? Playing middle linebacker.
Yeah, he was playing middle linebacker in high school, but then they moved him to D-end because they thought that's where he would be best at.
Tough as hell to play against both of you guys. I mean, in practice at least. Thankfully, I got to play with you guys on Friday nights. But you were both being recruited by GLIAC schools, you yourself especially, with a big draw coming from Michigan Tech. Obviously, the pull from your brother being there and just an overall interest from the Huskies who offered you. And what was it about Findlay that made it the right choice for you? I know both those schools are really high up on your list, and that was, really going to determine where you ended up. Was it a lot about the academic side of things and what you were majoring in?
Yeah, I'd say that's what it was. What I wanted to do was just get a bachelor's in marketing, and Michigan Tech offered that, but to also get like a minor in graphics design, and Michigan Tech had something fruity going on with that. They didn't have like a strict thing where the coach was like, yeah, we have that. But so I didn't know what was going on there. I knew Findlay had it, so that's why I committed there.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I was in a super similar situation as I'm a multimedia journalism major, and that's something that not every school offers, unfortunately, like a broadcasting program, TV and radio and the like. And Michigan Tech was the same thing. They are a STEM school, engineering, and they have to really focus on those areas for their recruitment of kids. And for them, like the communication department was just not there. And that it sucks for them because then that really limits the amount of kids they can pick up.
Yeah.
But I mean, how important is that? Obviously we want to play football as long as we can, but the academics really have to come first and a priority. And I'm glad that you did that in choosing Findlay. You've enjoyed it down there so far?
Yeah, so far so good. The first week I was here, it was kind of just like, all right, so when do we start doing the football stuff? So you get a little lost.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, what do I do? I'm living on my own, and I don't have a car. I didn't come down here with a car, so
yeah,
just kind of walking around campus. So it took a little bit to adjust to, but once you figure out where things are at, it's fun.
That's good. And you guys were in a routine for a bit, doing a lot more than we were as far as team practices and lifting and organized group sessions and everything. But why don't you talk a little bit about the news that you got when I was texting you the other day?
Yeah, so just recently there's been COVID outbreaks that have happened all over campus, and it's just been something that just keeps increasing and doesn't seem to change. And a lot of it is, I'd say, students going out after coaches say, don't, like, just stay with your group of friends, don't go to like a big party or something like that. And then there's always the freshmen that are like, screw you, dude, like, I do what I want, and you can see that like come to effect because I just recently got out of like a week and a half quarantine
Yeah.
due to like half the coaches actually having COVID.
Holy
So it was weird to see that. And then we came back, and after a break that long, they wanted to jump right back into full pads, like full hitting.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have a problem with that, but a lot of kids were just like, what's the point of it? We got 2 or 3 more weeks, and then we go on a break till January 18th.
Yeah.
So
That's
a bunch of like the leaders of the football team talked with the coaches, and we're like, hey, this is how like the kids feel. We feel like we should just like not practice till January 18th. So it's kind of like everyone came together and talked about it, but it was something that surprised me. I thought we were going to get like at least a week. I knew that it was going to get shut down, but
yeah. And that's good that, you know, your team captains, like you said, the guys on the team were comfortable enough to go and really bring up their concerns to the coaches, because we've seen during this season at all levels, obviously all football programs are having to deal with this disease, this pandemic, but even professionals, guys in the NFL have like not have that confidence and that comfortability to go and speak to their coaches. So that's at least a plus side of, I guess, that situation, even though to January 18th, that is a long time without any type of football activities. And for a lot of guys, I know, you know, school is obviously very important to them. You know, you're going to college to get an education. For a lot of guys, they're there to play football, and school as well, but they're there to play football primarily. So how do you see that playing out? I know here we've been canceled for a while, and we're seeing more and more guys go home and just really focus on those online type of classes. And the campus life has been very different.
Yeah, I see that come into effect now. But the thing that I see that affects all of these the student athletes the most is that they kind of just got down with school and football. But with football being gone, they're like, oh, I have all this time, but they don't really realize how much they're eating up.
Yeah.
And so I'm planning on maybe in like the next few weeks or so, after I like talk with my teachers, go like, hey, is it okay if I can go online? Because if there's absolutely nothing here, because I don't live too far away. I've gone home a couple weekends, but it's something that definitely changes the feel of the campus of what's going on, just because it's when all your football friends leave, you kind of notice like, oh, I've never noticed that person before, because it's a small campus. So when the football team leaves, that's like 25% of the campus. So
we'll get back to you a little bit here. I know you were recruited by a couple teams in the Mid-American Conference, the MAC Division I here in Michigan. You and I got the preferred walk-on from Central. I know Miami, Ohio was high on your list, and you were really looking there. I just wanted to ask you, because what was the difference? You had more experience than I did. What was the difference between being recruited by a school in the MAC as opposed to a school in the GLIAC or GMAC, if there were any that you noticed at all?
I'd say in the GLIAC, they're more honest with you with what they're talking about, because they have a little bit less room to lie. Because like Division I, it's like, come to football here and look at all this free stuff you get, and look at our dorms. And we play Division I, we're on TV. So a lot of stuff like that with a kid that doesn't know what's going on through the recruiting process, he's just going to go like, oh, wow, that's all cool. And you kind of like forget to ask, like, what do you have, like, academic wise? So I knew that Miami, Ohio was such a highly academic school. So that's why I was on the top of my list. And it's just an interesting recruiting process to see how some things fall. And just recruiting coaches are kind of like that one girl at the party that you think she likes you, but, you know, she doesn't.
She thinks she likes you, but she'd ditch you if she saw a better-looking guy come through that door.
Yeah, especially if he's, like, the same size, kind of looks like you, but she just saw something else in us.
That's awesome. I'm glad you ended up where you ended up. It sounds like you're enjoying it there, at least from what I've talked to you. And from a football standpoint, I think you're in a great position. The Oilers played a big-time schedule last year. They had 3 ranked teams on the 2019 agenda, lost by 1 point to a powerhouse team out of Fair State, and then some other great games, against in-state teams like Tiffin and Notre Dame in Ohio. What has that message been like from the coaches and those team leaders that you guys are going to step up the play this year, obviously looking to grow and win some of those big-time games? What has the message been from them?
it's just like we have the talent. It's like one of our mottos is don't like compete, dominate. And it's just something to see that, wow, we can hang with Ferris, and they were ranked second at the time when Findlay lost to them. And it's like, hey, we hung with Notre Dame, Ohio, and they were ranked fourth. So it's right there. It just matters to like what the kids are doing, and that's what the coaches do. They leave it up to the kids, like, hey, like we're here, we can only coach you so much, but if you really want to win a championship, then you got to bust your ass every day.
Yeah, you got to buy in, and I think, not to go back to relive high school, but you and I were a big part of that at Lake Orion. We go 3-6 our sophomore year with a new head coach, and then turn that program around. And that had nothing to do with just the two of us. That was a whole team of people buying in, coaches, players, everything. I'm not going to say that it was just you and I. There's no way you could say that. But from going from that 3-6 to an 8-1 and losing in the second round of the playoffs, unfortunately, that was an awesome season and an awesome experience. And thankfully, you don't have to do that really at Findlay. You're coming into a program that is established, and although they are looking to grow, you talked about how much talent they have, and they've had so much talent in the past. They've had 5 guys drafted into the NFL in the last 6 years, which for a program of that size, and you said like campus isn't very large, whatever, that is so impressive. So did that have anything to do with your decision to go to Findlay, looking at how some of their guys translate to the next level?
I mean, I think everyone wishes like they can make it to the NFL. That wasn't like something that was like, yeah, I'm going to go there because they put guys in the NFL.
Of course.
It's something that I'm going to work towards it, but that's not going to be my plan A.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I get that.
I came here to get the degree, and the biggest thing was they have 15 headquarters just around campus, so I can have an internship by sophomore, junior year. So when I graduate, I have a full-time job. And
that's a mindset that I think you have to have. I think you're right on the right track there.
Yeah, and if you're going D2, that is the mindset that you have to have.
Yeah.
Like you can have that mindset if you're going D1, depending on like what school you're going to. But I think that's where a lot of kids that commit to D2 schools make that miss up, because I mean, look at how many kids Grand Valley picks up every year.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
a good school.
Yeah,
but
it's
a
just
good
interesting how
program,
that all
they're not
different
going
operates. Yeah, no, you're totally right. And go back to that NFL talent a little bit. You've obviously got all these guys that are super talented. You're hanging with all of these nationally ranked Division II teams, but you're still playing at Donnell Stadium, which is the field that you share with Findlay High School. When are you guys going to get a new field for the campus varsity athletics? Is that anytime in the future?
Yeah, so we've heard like a couple of things about that, like maybe this year or next year. But we have a really nice practice field.
Good.
The turf came from like the Mercedes Dome, so
okay.
It's a really nice field. But then they didn't really show me the game field on my visit that long.
Well, yeah, it's not something you really wanted to highlight too much, I'd imagine.
It's something. It's nice. It's probably the same size as like Hillsdale, but to have a yellow F, that's the one thing that I'm like, can we just like paint that or like on game days? But yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. No, that'll be huge for the university. I know, like for students and things to have on-campus sports. I know, like you guys have to like bus down, or like it's a hike. It's off campus, obviously, to get down there. So having that right there with the practice facilities and other things will be huge for you guys. But we've talked the last couple episodes of Division I Rejects about how Ashland, who is currently in the GLIAC, has been in the GLIAC and has had great success actually in the GLIAC, winning some GLIAC championships, is moving to the GMAC next year, which means no more Ohio football programs are part of the GLIAC. So what does this do for the GMAC in adding a proven program that's won at the D2 level and has those GLIAC championships under their belt already?
Yeah, it's something that there's probably deeper meaning to it, but that's a lot of money that they're saving from changing into that conference.
Yep, I believe it.
But I don't, like with the GLIAC, all the schools besides like Saginaw Valley, Grand Valley, like Findlay and Ashland and all those, and Tiffin can all like play each other and not be too far of a hike.
Mm-hmm.
Now Michigan Tech and like Northern and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you're playing in the GLIAC. You might as well just buy a plane ticket for that.
I know to Ashland, it's like I haven't personally done it, but hearing about it, it's like over a 14-hour bus ride to get to Ashland.
I think Grand Valley went up to Northern Michigan last year, and they left like 2 days before the game started.
Yeah.
And it just looks like something that I wouldn't really be interested in. So I don't know like the business decision behind it, but I can understand why they did that.
Yeah, me too. And it stinks because we won't have that that presence in the GLIAC and a team that's really been competing. But at the same time, like you said, from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, from your standpoint, that's really all I've got for you today. But I did want to ask if you caught. I would assume you caught that Michigan State game, which is what we're going to get into right after this conversation. But what went wrong for the Wolverines and Jim Harbaugh? I want to hear your thoughts on that.
I personally think that the quarterback, I don't know what grade he is, but
is Joe Milton a redshirt sophomore? I believe. I'm gonna go with redshirt sophomore. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah, you can tell that he's a young quarterback, and he doesn't really trust his wideouts that much because he was like 1 for 26 deep balls. And
oh man,
it was something like ridiculous. Like you can't hold me to that quote, but he only threw like short passes, and you're not going to win a close game like that. And you can see like the frustration, and Harbaugh doesn't have the athletes as much. And I always have respect for Michigan State because they don't get the same recruiting Michigan does, but they always find a way to keep the game close or win.
That's true, and that's something we're definitely going to talk about is the recruiting class for Michigan and how different that's been over the past couple of years when compared to the Spartans. But I can't thank you enough, Isaac, for coming on. Hopefully I'll see you soon. It sounds like you're going to be online and home anyways, and I'll be home here in, I don't know, like a month. I'll be staying around campus. But thanks so much for coming on, boss, and I appreciate it. I'll see you.
I'll see you, boss.
The underdog win of this past weekend. Obviously, there are so many underdog wins in college football, it seems like every single weekend, because the unpredictability, especially with the season full, in the midst of a pandemic, there are so many things that could happen to every single individual program. But Michigan State, things are happening for this program. And after last week, we were doubters. I think, I know I was, at least. Were you kind of?
I mean, I knew that this season, even after this win, it's still going to be probably a rough one.
Most likely. I mean, it's not, you're not going to go and just keep building every week, which I hope that's how it is. But I think it's definitely will need to be a little bit of an adjustment period. But obviously what we're talking about is Michigan State getting the win over the Wolverines from Michigan. They were a 25-point underdog to U of M, and they beat Michigan in the Big House 27-24. So they barely scraped it out. And I think that really reflects the conservative play calling from Mel Tucker, what we saw throughout pretty much the whole game. And he really showed up in that game as a coach. Maybe he likes to stay in the background a lot. I know after the game, he gave all the credit to his assistant coaches, to his players, to his program, which is, he said all the things that you need to say.
Exactly.
So he got his first win as Spartans head coach and really shocked the world, or at least Michigan. I don't know if he shocked the world, but he shocked Michigan. What did you see from that game?
I really saw just something that Mel Tucker was really known for at Colorado, and I truly believe that they outcoached Michigan.
Yeah.
To be completely honest with you. I mean, if you think about it, 25-point underdog, U of M consistently brings in 5-star recruits. And I can't remember the last time State has brought in one. So
it's a good question.
It's really it just kind of goes to show you the game plan that they had put in place. The play calling, they knew the weak points of U of M. They knew that their secondary was having some issues. The fact that Don Brown stayed in man the entire game was kind of an iffy call for me.
Bold.
But, Michigan State exploited it, and they come out with the win because of it. And I was kind of wondering, during the game, I was like, well, this is kind of like a conservative play calling idea. But, especially right before half, when they don't go to take the shot in the end zone, they were, They definitely were in spot to, take another shot and, had an opportunity to put the game away. But I think they were just trying to play conservative, not try and give up the ball.
Especially after last week
with so many turnovers.
Yeah.
So, Rocky Lombardi played really good. No turnovers, 3 touchdowns. And then, the true freshman player of the week. That's
Slick Rick.
Yes, exactly.
Unreal game.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about all of that. But first, I wanted to, obviously did a lot of reading from different news sources about the game. And one thing I really loved was the Detroit Free Press writer, Sean Windsor, who wrote about how wrong he was about the gap between the two programs. And I first will say he's not the only one. I think everyone and their mother thought that Michigan was going to win that game on either side. of that contest, and he said that he forgot a basic rule of college football, and quote, don't make too much of don't make too much of 1 week, especially week number 1. So we showed in that week, in that game against Michigan, that when we didn't turn the ball over 6 times, and by we I mean Michigan State, but when they don't turn the ball over 6 times, they can be a decent football team. And Michigan in week 1, maybe Minnesota didn't deserve to be ranked because that was a highly touted matchup between 2 big-time opponents. And, now we're seeing that Minnesota really probably didn't have any business being ranked, and it wasn't as big of a win for Michigan as we thought.
Yeah, I mean, especially after losing to Maryland. I mean, it was a close game, but Maryland week 1 got blown out by Northwestern. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's really hard to tell. I heard some things about Minnesota missing like 6 starters or something like that. So that's also hard to tell as well, whether or not if they have those playmakers back, if that's going to be a different game, which it more likely probably would have been. But just to go back to the Michigan State game, how long do you think Harbaugh is going to stay?
That is a great question. And I personally do not think it will be much longer. The question for me is, will it be of his own will or will it be of the university letting him go? Because as it stands right now, his record against Michigan State and Ohio State at home in the Big House is 1-6, with the 1 win coming over Michigan State last year. And that was a dilapidated Spartans team. That was nothing of the actual D'Antonio era that we were used to seeing.
Exactly.
I mean, a win is a win for the Wolverines, but that's kind of just patting the stats. He really should be 0 at home, which is unreal. The Wolverines have been close. They've been very close, but they have never reached that summit of a Big Ten championship or a playoff berth under Harbaugh, and that is the one thing that will continue to bite him in the butt until he's out of Michigan. He brings those khaki pants out of Michigan. So for a program who is known nationally to have one of the best recruiting classes, you already hinted at it, they bring in these highly touted recruits from across the country, and they always say, I mean, I sound extremely biased, which I probably am because I'm a huge Michigan State fan, but they always say that the best players in Michigan go to Michigan.
Yeah.
But they're always getting dudes from the West Coast and all these other states. And if you're going to widen your scope of recruiting like that, you better bring in some dudes who are going to play.
Exactly.
And obviously they've had a ton of great players over the years. Yeah. They've had dudes transition into the NFL seamlessly. But they were definitely, I think I would agree that they were outcoached because you look at, I know the broadcasters during the game, they made a point about how the referees were calling the game. Very tic-tacky on the outside, very close to the belt, right? They weren't really letting anything slip. So what did Michigan State do? They noticed, like you said, Don Brown was staying in man, which basically says, my athletes are better than your athletes, and we will beat you one-on-one and open up some lanes for some potential pass rushers.
Exactly.
Not only did the pass rush not really hit home for Michigan for the majority of the game, they took advantage of the outside, especially Vincent Gray, who actually played in my league in high school, the OAA. So I played against his high school, Rochester Adams, multiple times, played against him, actually. He is a junior right now, I believe, and I think he got called for multiple holding penalties and was on the receiving end of a few of Lombardi's deep balls to Ricky White out there, who is the Big Ten Freshman of the Week. But for Michigan State to not only acknowledge the fact that the refs were calling that in that certain fashion, but to immediately target that and take advantage of that in the middle of a game, that's a huge coaching move.
Exactly.
And I think that was a huge reason that Lombardi had the success that he had that we haven't previously seen from him.
Yeah, and one of the biggest takeaways for me is also that Michigan State also had such a one-dimensional play calling idea. It was, they tried running the ball a lot, but they just really weren't getting anywhere. I mean, on the first drive, they broke away for 15 to 20 yards or something like that. But then after that, it was pretty much every time they handed the ball off, it was maybe 3 yards.
I will say, though, I give him credit because Mel Tucker or, whoever was doing the play calling, they didn't give up on the run game. They never gave up
they
on
didn't.
And so sometimes that would definitely be a detriment to a team. And like you said, like a one-dimensional play calling. But I think that was big for them to continue to trust that run game, because when you have a team like Michigan, whose defense has been notoriously great, when you can let a defense and a team like that focus in on one aspect of your game, and you have pair that with a defensive coordinator like Don Brown, who has the level of experience that he has, and okay, in this down and distance, they're throwing the ball.
Yeah, exactly.
If you become that predictable, all of a sudden you've got stunts, you've got these different guys coming off the outside, showing pressure and then flaking or whatever. And then your quarterback, especially for a guy like Lombardi, who just does not have the experience level at this point, that would be a nightmare for him. So I'm glad personally they stuck with the run game, even though they did not have a lot of success with it for the most part of the game. But even then, that opens up. Cameron Hayward had a touchdown pass, like swinging out to the outside. It opens up things like that. You have to honor the running back, and that's just another player that you have to take into account in a defensive scheme.
Yeah, exactly. And they really exploited U of M, and it was just a great, fundamentally sound game by Michigan State as a whole. They deserve the win.
The exact opposite of last week.
Yeah, exactly. It was you're going to see the rough patches with State, especially week one. That was going to be rough. Did I still think they were going to lose? I honestly thought they had no business losing, but that is the perfect way to rebound, show that Tucker means business, and that he is a great play caller. He knows what he's doing, and he has the experience from around the league. I mean, I know Nick Saban was talking him up a little bit. A couple quotes that were on social media about him being a really good coach, and that he has the experience to take State to the next level, which I think he does. Just by judging by last game, it looks like he knows what he's going to do. He has the right mentality for them, and I think that they're going to be in a good place come these next few years.
Yeah, and you know what Mel Tucker and Nick Saban have in common?
What do you think?
I'm pretty sure they are the only two coaches in Michigan State's history to lose their first game as a Spartan and then win their first game against Michigan.
I have never heard about that.
It's a very unique stat, and like I say, they have stats for literally everything today.
Yeah.
But I saw that. I thought that was super interesting. I don't know if it was a bounce back win for Saban too, but for Mel Tucker, it sure was. And for his quarterback, Rocky Lombardi, who you already talked about, he had 3 touchdowns, went 17 for 32, 323 yards. And after the game, he said that we expected it. We expected the win.
Yeah.
And it was a mindset. And I think everybody outside of that Michigan State locker room thought the polar opposite.
Exactly. Even State's fans, they were just deteriorating by the second. I went on Twitter.
It's almost like watching a Lions game.
Yeah, exactly.
Like false hope almost.
It was weird though, but it just goes to show you. I looked at some of the comments of what Michigan State was playing, and it was just tear down after tear down, and even from its own
fan base.
Exactly. So it was I think they needed this just to kind of give them some hope. Fill Spartan Stadium back up, obviously once it's allowed, but it was deteriorating there for a little bit. They were not selling out games like they normally were back when the era of Connor Cook and really the golden years of the Antonio area. So I think that needs to come back alive. I think State can become that powerhouse that they once were, and really show that difference between them and U of M.
Yeah, Ricky White, Big Ten Freshman of the Week. We've already said his name a few times because you really have to. 8 catches, 196 yards, and a touchdown to earn him that title. And they were without a true sophomore, Trey Mosley, who played in my league in high school as well at West Bloomfield and in the OAA. So a lot of these guys are coming from Michigan playing for either Michigan or Michigan State. But I thought they missed Trey Mosley on the outside. He's a great playmaker. But that Ricky White, his performance, that all that does is spread the responsibility, and I love that. And we have a couple guys now that are making some really big time plays on the outside, and then we have the backfield going between Hayward and Collins, and some consistency. I guess is what I'm trying to say, is some consistency. And so my major takeaway from this game is that Michigan State not only showed up, but they capitalized on Michigan's mistakes, and a lot of that has to do with coaching, a lot of that has to do with playmaking. And that was the difference maker for me, is that Michigan State didn't concede any mistakes of their own. They played very fundamentally sound football, like you said. And when Michigan, messed up or took a misstep or whatever, Michigan State was there, and they were there continually. And I think the score perfectly reflects that in a 27-24 win that had you on the edge of your seat pretty much the whole time.
Yeah.
And I said it was like a Lions game because, we thought there was no business we should be in this game, and here we are. We're winning. And we're winning in a pretty good fashion at certain points of the game. We scored first.
Yeah.
Very Lions-esque.
Yeah.
That was something that I would have never predicted. And then, all of a sudden I go from just laying down and kind of chilling watching the game. I'm sitting up into this thing.
Yeah.
I was ready to see where this went. So
exactly.
It was a great weekend for Michigan State. but a great weekend it was not for the Clemson football team, even though they did get the win over Boston College. Quarterback Trevor Lawrence was out. He missed Saturday's game against Boston College, where the Tigers trailed by 18 at halftime against unranked Boston College, unranked.
They were
right?
unranked at the time.
Yeah, I mean, solid football team, but an unranked team still. Clemson, unfortunately for, what are they? Boston College. What's their mascot?
Some bird. I don't remember.
Some bird.
I think it's an eagle or something.
Anyways, unfortunately for Boston College, Clemson does come back. They got the win 34-28 under a different quarterback. And Clemson did show that they have playmakers, especially Etienne out of the backfield. He had a huge day for Clemson. I think he was separating the difference maker for Clemson and getting them that win. But this week, Lawrence is still in isolation. Clemson has Notre Dame, who is number 4 in the country, a strong team in all facets of the football. And I think this could be the first loss for the Clemson Tigers team.
Yeah, and I think it's really just going to, go off of how DJ Uyunglele he plays.
I cannot believe that you just pronounced that. I avoided saying his name just because I did not even want to try.
Yeah, it's
that is the quarterback who came in the absence of Trevor Lawrence.
Exactly, and he played his heart out and he played really well.
Yeah, agreed.
But I really do think the way that this game is going to teeter is just based off of the way that he plays. I know Notre Dame, I believe they still have like all of their playmakers. Ian Buck is their quarterback.
And he is a guy that's been there for years.
Exactly. He's a veteran.
Yeah.
If you really, in any facets of college football, he is what would be considered a veteran. He's been there when they made the playoffs and played Clemson, actually, and they were ranked. Yep. I believe they were ranked, what was it?
At the time when they played?
Yeah, in the playoffs.
That I don't know.
I don't remember, but I do remember that they got smacked by
it was probably
Clemson.
1-4.
I'm sure there's got to be some pimped up hostility from that game. And Notre Dame's really going to be looking to take over. And I know somebody asked Notre Dame's head coach like how it's been, what like the environment of Notre Dame football has been since that loss to Clemson. And I believe they've only lost 3 games in total.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like they in their last 32 games, I believe they're 28-3.
Man.
So that would be 31.
Yeah, well,
whatever.
The math. We're
all
not here
you
to do
know,
math.
all you need to know is that they've been doing good, and they're really looking forward to this week against Clemson, trying to capitalize on their momentum and also, the backwards momentum of Clemson losing Trevor Lawrence. It's all gonna, dictate of how DJ plays, but it's really going to be telling to see, what kind of team Dabo really has.
We really will see what kind of team Dabo has. This will be a statement game for them. And one of the talking points at the beginning of the season, and as it well should be, is that Notre Dame is, I guess you could say, an honorary member of the ACC this year. And now all of a sudden, with Clemson without Trevor Lawrence, their quarterback, their guy, their Heisman candidate, all of a sudden ACC is not so clearly in Clemson's hands anymore because Notre Dame is right here, and this win would put them ahead. And for me, that's something that Notre Dame has never been in one of these Power 5 conferences. They've always just been the non-conference game, even though they've had a very strong team for many, many years.
Yeah.
This is something for me that coming to the ACC in your first year and potentially have a season where you're going to go and win the thing outright. And that's another reason that, they're in a really good position right now to have a legitimate chance at a playoff berth.
I think so too. But it's really going to show whatever happens this game. I think one of the teams is going to be pushed out of the playoffs. So
yeah, possibly.
It's all going to depend on how this team really plays. Whether it's Notre Dame coming out on top or Clemson, one of them is going to fall. So it's going to be really interesting. I still think either of the teams could recover and still make the playoffs, no matter what happens, unless it's a complete blowout. But if the game is close, I really can see both of either of the teams recovering. But now with Big Ten and Ohio State coming into the picture, it's all gonna change the picture of what really could happen.
Yeah, it is, and at least Trevor Lawrence does not have a 21-day quarantine like Graham Mertz from Wisconsin. And we actually just got news today. We're recording this on Tuesday, so it'll probably be uploaded on a Thursday or Friday of this week. But we got news today that Wisconsin's game against Purdue, scheduled for this weekend, has been canceled.
Yeah.
So not only did they miss out against Nebraska, now they're missing out against Purdue. And if they have one more game canceled due to COVID, they are not eligible to play in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
How huge is that for a program that we just talked about last week was the front runner out of the Big Ten West, correct? Yeah, they're in the West, and they're the best team, I think far and away in the West in the Big Ten. So if you take out a player like that, all of a sudden you have really what you have is a much easier route from whoever wins the East to just take over the Big Ten.
Yeah, exactly.
So that'll be really interesting to see for Wisconsin. But one thing that I hated to see this weekend was watching my Detroit Lions. I only got to watch very little of the game because I hate trying to figure out how to watch football here in my dorm. It's ridiculous. Usually when it's on Fox, it's out of market and I don't have the Sunday ticket or whatever, but then now it's on CBS and they've got their own streaming service and all of these things, and they make it so confusing. So I didn't get to watch too much of it, but I was staying updated, obviously, and the parts that I did get to watch were concerning, to say in the least. And I said that when I kind of went on my tirade a few episodes ago about how the Lions could be this playoff contender given their next 6 weeks of competition and the teams that they're going to be playing against, I did say that the Colts were going to be by far and away the hardest out of the next 6 weeks. But I didn't think we were going to get beat by 20 points. Coming off back-to-back wins, Jacksonville, and then that huge emotional momentum-winning game with the last-minute drive against the Falcons, the Lions totaled 29 yards rushing on the game. We talked about Michigan State and how they didn't get much done on the ground. Well, the Lions went and one-upped them, and they did that by a lot. 29 yards the entire game. Jamal Agnew, who's usually just a return specialist for Detroit, he led with 11 yards on one carry. The next leading rusher, Matthew Stafford, with 10 yards on one carry. That is the definition of a one-dimensional offense. DeAndre Swift I think he averaged like 0.2 yards per carry, and then Adrian Peterson had like 5 or 6 carries himself, and he was averaging like a yard per.
It was hard to watch, to say the least, at least for them. I kind of tuned in and out because I was watching. The Packers have a rough one too.
I was going to say we'll talk about that in a second, because the Packers did not have the showing that I don't think anyone expected against Minnesota over the weekend. But Stafford still put up some solid numbers in the game against the Colts. But I think when you throw the ball 42 times out of some 50-odd plays, first of all, 50-some plays is a very low number for an offense to have over the course of a game. I feel like if you hold a team to 50-some plays, you're making sure that you keep that offense off the field. And I'm sure that was part of the reason that the Colts, did that. They carried on some long drives, some drives that went in, encompassed a large total of the field, and they wanted to keep their defense off the field as much as possible because they knew that Lions defense, I'm assuming they knew, I'm just going to speak for them, that it was a liability in certain areas. So if you throw the ball 42 times and you have a guy like Stafford throwing that said football 42 times, he's going to put up big numbers no matter what. I don't think there's any way around that. And he was, I think he did his best to keep him in that game, but it was a terrible effort by the Lions. And it just, they have Minnesota this weekend coming up, which is why I wanted to kind of transition to that Green Bay talk, because I would have said, 2 weeks ago, this is an easy win. This is a must win for Detroit. All of a sudden, Minnesota comes out of nowhere and beats the Packers on Sunday out of nowhere. What'd you see in that game?
It's really hard to tell. But I know, Packers first week ended up beating Vikings by, I think it was like double their score.
Yeah. And so, they looked atrocious. Minnesota did not look like they should field a football team.
Exactly. So, it's really hard to tell what really went on. I didn't see, the same output out of the Packers offense as what I normally would have. I believe the Packers scored under 30, which is, that was mind-boggling to me, especially going up against the Vikings defense. They had, one of the worst. So it's hard to tell for me. I know Packers are going to be just fine. Still 5-2. I believe they're still at the top of the NFC North, but it's going to be hard going into these next few weeks, especially with that huge momentum drop that they had. But I think we'll still be fine.
Because first you have a huge dramatic loss against the team like the Buccaneers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But then they come and bounce back, and they show up, and Aaron Rodgers showed up in particular, right?
Yeah,
he showed up and had huge numbers after that game. So I guess hopefully for Packers fans at least, hopefully you see him kind of repeat what he's done in the past and come back and show up again with that chip on his shoulder.
But I do think still to this day, the major flaw of our defense and actually just our team in general is just our interior defense.
Really? Front seven?
Oh, I wouldn't even necessarily say front seven. Our linebacker core is atrocious, and we need to fix that at some point.
Interesting.
I'd love to see a free agent move.
With the deadline coming up here very soon.
I'd love to see a free agent or just a trade of some sort to make a move to try and stop some of the running plays. Dalvin Cook had himself a day.
He did.
And literally carried the Vikings.
He kind of did.
So,
he kind of did, didn't he?
But it was really just telling to see what was really going on with the defense. Packers offense wasn't having much of a day either. Can't, entirely blame the defense, but they did let up a lot of points, which I would not have liked to see. But Vikings, I believe their last 2 losses or something like that was within 1 point.
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's true. It's not like they've been, like that first week against the Packers where they were blown out.
Exactly.
Quite literally. It's not like that's been a week-by-week story for them. And even though they've been losing consistently, it has not been those 2 or 3 score telltale games.
So it's going to be hard to see, but Packers are still going to be fine. I'm interested to see what happens to Minnesota from here on out, but they could make a run for it and at least get to their record above what it should be.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
We'll see.
Especially right now with the Packers and the Bears kind of holding that top of the NFC North, and the Lions, I don't even know what to say about them at this point, but we have had development in the Stephon Gilmore department. And I know we talked about the liability of the Lions secondary with Trufant still out, one of their starting cornerbacks, and Okudah being asked to come in as a rookie and really take this large role upon himself to guard some of the best talent in the league, which is something, it's a very tall ask for any rookie. I know Okudah's a very talented one at that, a first-round draft pick.
One of the hardest positions to play in football. And
I totally agree with
physically demanding, especially.
Yeah, I mean, just keeping up. When it boils down to it, the simple way of saying it is that the guy that you're guarding knows where he's going, and you simply do not.
Exactly.
You can guess, and you can look at, whatever tendencies they have.
Exactly. And that guy is really fast.
He's really fast. He's usually really big, and he catches pretty much everything you throw at him.
Yeah, so corner is definitely nothing to...
It's a tall task for those guys. But back to Gilmore. We had ESPN's Deanna Rossini reported via Twitter that, quote, multiple teams who have called the Patriots about cornerback Stephon Gilmore were told by New England that they want a first-round pick and a player in exchange. And we talked about this last week. It's not like they're just going to give up Gilmore all of a sudden, even though they are entertaining the options of potentially trading him, before this deadline comes up. But they're going to want a first-round pick and a player in exchange. Is this within the Lions' capabilities at this point?
I don't really know what the Lions should do with this. I don't think the Patriots are, out of their minds for asking that. Because
no, I don't think so either.
Stephon Gilmore is a very high caliber player. I think he would be worth a first round pick, especially just because Stephon Gilmore's production. You know what he's going to give you.
99 overall.
Hard, yeah, exactly. It's hard to tell, especially with like a rookie, what you're really going to get. So with the Lions, you know what you're going to get with Stephon Gilmore as opposed to a first round pick where the Lions have had some issues in the past with choosing, their draft picks.
That's true.
So I don't think entirely that would be a bad decision to go with Stephon Gilmore to, make an addition to their team.
I guess it all depends on, right now we don't even know if the Lions are actually interested. They've had teams call and ask about Gilmore, the Patriots have, but I don't think anyone's really been open about what particular teams those were and how interested, in fact, that they were. So it depends on that, and it also depends on, the Lions. We talked about them, quote, rebuilding. I always, air quote that, rebuilding, right? They've been rebuilding for way too long.
Decades.
And if they think that this is the team that they're going to try and run with, then an addition like him is a no-brainer. Right,
exactly.
If you're going to try and make a run for this thing in the next couple of years here, while you still have Stafford and Galladay and Marvin Jones and all these weapons, right, with this running back room that we have, shoring up some spots in the offensive line and just really put together that defense and that secondary. The secondary is really important for them right now. If you think there's any chance that you're going to try and make a run for it, at least go make some type of playoff run in the next few years. If that's on anywhere on their goals, this is a no-brainer for them. And I think it has to be for Matt Patricia because there's already calls for him to be gone. So you can't, for him, you can't have this 8-year plan of how you're going to slowly progress the program.
Exactly.
You don't have time to do that. It's got to be now. Yeah. So for a guy like him, from a head coaching position, that's something you want to look into from an outsider's perspective. Obviously, we don't understand what the inner workings of that organization are, but it'd be interesting to see from an owner and GM perspective what they're thinking about that situation and if they've already made up their mind as far as after this season, what direction the organization is going to take. But are there any other potential landing spots for Gilmore out in the NFL, and who do you think that would have a good shot of landing him?
That I really have no idea. To
be
completely honest with you, I think any team would be willing to take him.
Oh, well, yeah, for sure.
So it's really just going to be. I don't really know who's got the weakest spot for corners. Obviously, I think that team's going to try and go for him.
Yeah.
But it's going to be hard to tell where he'll probably land up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just whoever's going to have the weakest point and needs him right now.
And has the capabilities of getting him, because I know a team that I was thinking about was the Tennessee Titans, who are a team that right now are looking, again, to make a run, right? They're trying to make a run for this thing. They want to have those pieces, and their defense these last couple of weeks, coming off back-to-back losses for the Titans, has been notoriously lackluster in that department, especially in the secondary. So that's a team I think could really use him. Now, do they have the cap space, and do they have the ability to go after a big-name target like Stephon Gilmore? I don't think so. I really don't think so.
I don't know if at this point it's really realistic for them.
No, probably not.
But we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. Tua Tagovailoa got his first NFL win over the LA Rams. Now, it's not the stat line that he was hoping for. He went 12 for 22, 93 yards and a touchdown. And really, all this says to me is that I wish Fitzpatrick was back, because
I was just about to say that.
Love Tua. I loved that image of him sitting on the 16-yard line, or I could have totally misquoted that, but did you see that picture after the game of him sitting on the yard line? The same yard line where he had that hip injury and he didn't know if he was ever going to be playing football again at any level, college or NFL level. And here he is getting his first win over LA. Very proud for the kid. He's older than me, but the kid, relatively speaking, in NFL terms. But that Miami defense is what showed up big for them. The real reason why they pulled away from LA on Sunday was that defense, who I guess now is one of the better defenses in the league.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I did not expect. But the Dolphins are in a legitimate hunt for that playoff berth. But I just go back to the fact that I just don't know if I like that move to move on with Tua so early on. I think from my perspective, right, of just a fan of the game and a fan of talent in the game, that talent that's been around, Fitzpatrick deserved one run with this team that he had helped put in this position in the first place. I think he deserved that run to go with them. He really felt like he was at home in Miami for the first time in a long time in his career. I really feel for this guy. Especially
because of the fact of, you look at the history of where Fitzpatrick has been, all the teams that he's been with, just his mentality, his experience level with the game. I agree that he was a great mentor for Tua, but for him to be taken out of the picture so early, and not really being able to show he can show him in practice, and I guess that's good as well. But to be able to watch game film of Fitzpatrick is going to be a lot more of a better learning experience,
and not even performance, just body, mannerisms and behavior, and how to really control a locker room. Which I have zero doubts that Tua will be able to do that in the future.
Exactly,
just with excuse me, but with his personality, being able to control a locker room, I don't think he'll have a problem with that. Coming from a program like Alabama, but for Fitzpatrick, like I said, you really just feel for him. And so what is the downside of having him sit behind Fitzpatrick for a year, like we've seen with a lot of quarterbacks? You know what I mean? Especially with a guy like Tua, who's had this injury-prone history in the latter years of his college career.
That was the other thing that I was going to bring up.
To risk that, right? And thankfully, he's staying healthy. But right now, just give him that year of recovery to develop, not so much physically, but just mentally, getting that playbook assimilated into his head and really learning from a guy like Fitzpatrick.
Exactly. And I think with the quarterback position, it's so important to be comfortable with, your play calling. It's so comfortable just to be comfortable with the plays in general, knowing what an NFL defense is going to do. That's going to be where that next step is for really being prepared to play at the next level. Yeah. So with him going in so early, he's missing those key points of those experience, where Fitzpatrick doesn't really need that. He's been in the league for so long. I don't agree with the move to bench him. I don't know what they're going to plan on doing with him, especially if Tua is going to stay in here. I don't know if they're going to try and make a trade with him again. So then now he's on another team. And I don't even know how many teams he's been on. It's been kind of the
question.
same, story for him and somebody like McCown or somebody like that.
Yeah,
so,
that's actually a really good comparison.
Exactly.
I think.
So, and he's been such a great mentor for really anybody in this league. Especially like when he was on the Jets, he helped Darnold out. But it's going to be hard to tell with Tua. I don't know why they would do that, especially coming off of that injury. That was a grueling injury, and I think you give him a little bit more time to heal, make sure he's really in that position to be able to play, stay healthy, and make the moves that we know he's really capable of, and put him into the position where he's going to be successful and not necessarily throw him into the fire, especially when you have a quarterback playing at such a high level. So I don't really know what the move with that was.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that. So we'll kind of move on here. The New York Giants, they keep it close, but they cannot pull out the win in MetLife over Tampa Bay and Tom Brady. That game looked extremely close when they were playing that. And honestly, I did not think that Tampa Bay really had any business winning that game because it looked like it was all New York there for a large stretch of that game. But one thing I wanted to look at is the Giants at one point had 3 rookie offensive linemen in the game at once on the field. So 3 out of your 5 up front there are rookies, brand new, being initiated to this league. And even though they're performing at a higher level as a unit right now collectively than we saw in the first few weeks with Saquon before he had that unfortunate injury, he was getting destroyed in the backfield on just about every single carry, and you just felt for him. They have elevated their play since then, but this front 5 has a long way to go for New York. And the narrative right now that's being formed by a few sources that I've been reading up on is that maybe Daniel Jones is the one holding back New York. And I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, but I think it's really more than the QB position, and it comes back to that offensive line and really rounding out that offense.
It's really hard to tell, and I have seen a few things where it shows, like I saw a couple of clips of where Daniel Jones hasn't really been helping out his offensive line.
Yeah.
Where his movements in the pocket have been actually putting him in a worse position than he would have been had him just stay in the pocket and just stay with that, comfortable pocket that he had.
Yeah.
But he really likes to move around. He likes to be on the move. Make throws on the run. That's kind of his play style.
And that's a play style we've seen adopted by a lot of NFL quarterbacks. But going back to what you're talking about his decision-making in the pocket, how much of those errors and mental mistakes do you attribute to being with a new offensive line that may not have the cohesion of a unit that you'd expect usually up there?
Exactly, and that is all going to come down to the experience that he's had with the O-line. Everybody's different, in the way that their movements, judging whether or not this guy's going to kick him out, where the certain gaps are, where he can slide up, where he can push back. Just knowing what the offensive line, judging off of what's going on in practice or recent games, when you have such a young offensive line, you're not going to really know what they're comfortable with, what they're really going to want to do, where they're going to want to move the guy. So it's all, I think it's a cumulative issue. I don't think it's just one thing that you can put a finger on and be like,
and that's typically, I feel like, how it is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So for me, though, what I'm thinking about it, obviously there is a disparity between, say, the Giants' offensive line and other teams' offensive lines in the league, skill level-wise, but you also have to think these are different people with different personalities, and they're going to interact in different ways, right? That's just how it is. That's how the business is, and they're all professionals about it, and you like to think that, when you take somebody out, you're going to have a replacement immediately. He's going to come in and do his job and fulfill his duty, but the way that he interacts with the other 4 offensive linemen may be different because a lot of that up on the offensive line is all about communication and really being able to effectively communicate with the other people and know what you're doing before that play happens.
Exactly.
The Steelers, though, are putting together something that has been, I guess you could say, surprising because, you knew that with Big Ben coming back that they were going to be legit this year. They were going to be, they were going to field a legitimate team, especially after last year, going 8-8 without pretty much a real quarterback right? But right now, they're the only remaining unbeaten team. It's 2 weeks now. They've been the only unbeaten, and they are the top dog. The number one ranking in the NFL Week 9 power rankings goes to the Steelers. They had that 28-24 win over Baltimore, and that makes Mike Tomlin the winningest African-American coach in NFL history, passing the previous leader, Tony Dungy. And I don't think this team's success is talked about with his name attached enough. Because I just mentioned that team last year that went 8-8. Obviously, the defense, a lot of those pieces were still there. A lot of those defensive pieces that we talk about this year
they
were a part of that team's success last year. But offensively, the addition to Claypool this year, was huge. That's another guy that's going to stretch out NFL defenses. Big Ben coming back. That cannot be understated as far as what type of impact he's had, not only on this team, but in the locker room. And some of the other controversy they went through last year. For them to go 8-8, and they really barely missed out on a playoff berth. That was a team that people thought was going to have a rebuild. And I hate that word now. I kind of hate that word. I hate saying rebuild because it's just ridiculous that they can go, when they're supposed to have a rebuild, they go 8-8. When the Lions have a rebuild, they could go what? I don't even know what. Winless?
I don't even know, dude. With them, I don't even know what you can consider a rebuild with the Lions at this point.
But one of the telling things from this past week from Pittsburgh was their defense led up a season-high 275 rushing yards against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. That is a lot. Not only for the Pittsburgh defense. And we saw them snuff out Derrick Henry just a week prior.
They did. Against
the Tennessee Titans. We saw them really, and especially in the first half, they took Derrick Henry basically out of the game for the Titans, and that was a huge reason for their success. So for them to play against the Ravens, who run, admittedly, a very different scheme than the Titans with that type of triple option, it's very true. It's more of a college type.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really more prevalent in
like
college.
Georgia Tech.
Yeah, it is. And when you have guys like Ingram and Lamar Jackson, and they have some weapons at tight end too that are really prominent for their team, they spread the ball around very well. But that Pittsburgh defense turned around and they made some key plays. The reason that they won this game, even though it was tight, it was a 4-point win here. They created 4 turnovers and they caused a plethora of problems for that Baltimore offense. One of those was actually a pick 6 off Lamar Jackson. And for me, that's what they're used to, though, is defense winning them games. And when you get into the playoffs, they always talk about defense wins championships. And if that's so, Pittsburgh is in a great spot.
Exactly. And I do think we're going to see something similar to like the playoff run that happened in 2010. Yeah. Obviously with the Steelers and then the Packers coming out, in that Super Bowl. But I think it's probably going to be Pittsburgh, Chiefs, and Ravens kind of fighting for that spot.
Okay. Could
toss in the Titans, judging off what run they might have.
I would say this week for the Titans is going to be huge because they're coming off back-to-back losses. They have dropped quite a bit. We're going to need to see some more consistent play out of their defense. It'll be interesting to see if they make any moves before that trade deadline and try and pick up any pieces for that defense.
But then on the NFC side, I really think it's really just going to boil down to the Packers and the Seahawks.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think that's just going to be the two teams. Whether or not Seahawks come out and they beat the Packers, I think that's going to be the story of what happens in the playoffs. I remember last year, Packers came out with that win over them in the divisionals, but it's really going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out and who's going to come out in the Super Bowl.
I agree. And the Seahawks, we didn't really talk about them. They had a 10-point win over the 49ers, who the 49ers have seen a lot of up and down this season, especially coming off of that Super Bowl appearance last year with Jimmy G and that spectacular defense with that running game against the Packers, who had like 250 yards before even being touched in that NFC Championship game. They've had an interesting year. They sit at 4-4 right now after that loss to the Seahawks. And this upcoming week for the 49ers is not going to be much better because they're actually without Kittle, Jimmy G, and a couple other key pieces, not because of COVID, but because of injuries.
Yeah.
So that team is very, I think they have upwards of $80 million right now on the IR in terms of cap space.
Exactly. Bosa.
That's true as well.
He's gone. So I think the 49ers season's pretty much, in the can at this point, but.
Seriously.
It's hard to tell.
The MVP for Russ, that train has started to pick up again after there was a week, previously where they thought possibly he had lost kind of his edge, but he really showed up in this 49ers game, 27 for 37, 261 yards, 4 touchdowns, man. that right now he's the front runner and he's leading that team. I'd agree with you. They're going to be a definite favorite coming out of the NFC.
Yeah, for sure.
But that's all we've got for today on Division One Rejects, Episode 7. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether you're watching, listening, maybe doing a little bit of both. Hope everyone had a great Halloween, watched some great college football, and looking forward to this weekend's matchups. Thank you.